What's up, everybody? Gary Simon here of DesignCourse, and today we've got a huge one, and also sort of a channel first because I'm actually doing a collab with somebody who's at the very tail end of this video, and I'll get to that in a second. But today, this is a full stack development process video where I'm going to show you how to make this app right here, which is a fictional app, Mooncoins. All right, so this is currently on a local host in a dev environment, and basically it just allows a person to add different cryptocurrencies to track them, to see, what their prices are and all of that good stuff. We could also see that, it is responsive, and we're going to be getting into a lot of considerations basically about getting this up and running. So what is full stack development? Well, it depends on who you ask. Some sources say it's just being able to handle front end and back end development. Others say you need to know some graphic design, you need to know some UI, UX design, maybe identity design, and deployment. For this video, we're gonna assume that it means a lot of those things. So first, we're going to design the logo in Adobe Illustrator. And then second, we're gonna hop into Adobe Experience Design to deal with the UI, UX, like mock-up of the user interface. And then we're going to put our front-end development hats on and hop into Visual Studio Code with Vue. So Vue 3 is what we're going to be using. And by the way, the stack is MEVN, which is MongoDB, Express.js, also Vue 3 and Node.js. And then we'll hop into Backend, which will be with Express, Node.js, and MongoDB, because we're going to be allowing whatever you want to track, it's going to be stored in MongoDB, and then we're going to use the Crypto Compare API to pull all the latest data based on your choices. And then finally, this is where Sid from DevOps directive comes into play, because he's going to handle the DevOps portion, which is deployment of the app. I am terrible at that stuff. So I asked him to take, the process or take on the challenge of taking my app and then using a VPS from the sponsor of this video, which is Hostinger.com, and making it a reality from scratch in the command line. So he's going to do a great job of explaining how to do all that stuff from scratch. All right. So definitely check out his channel, which is DevOps Directive. His name's Sid, and I'll have a link here in the YouTube description. And the sponsor of this video is Hostinger.com. And a few months ago, I did another video with them where we tackled shared web hosting for a very simple personal portfolio website, and I'll link that video here in the description. But for this one, we're using their VPS hosting, and that's because we're building a more robust app with a Node.js backend. And so why would you choose Hostinger? Well, they have the best price to quality ratio on the market, best support, which is 24/7, 365, and a 30-day money-back guarantee, and also ultra-fast servers. And also, one thing to note, when you check out for any of their hosting services, make sure to use the link here in the description, and coupon code DesignCourse will be applied here to get 10% off. All right, so real quick before we get into the design side of things, domains, all right? So usually after, obviously, I have the idea of the app or whatever, I want to get a name. And so I always just go to a domain checker. You can definitely use Hostinger's. You can just click on one of the YouTube links here at the top, one of the top links to get their domain checker. And then it's a determination, of trying to come up with a name that's unique. Try to keep it as short as possible and memorable, and also relevant based on, the purpose of the business. And so for us, the one that I decided to use is Mooncoins. And when I searched for that, the .com was not available, but the .net was. And so I went ahead with that as an option. So Mooncoins, .net, do your searches and see what ends up coming back. Obviously, you can't use the same one, but yeah, this is the one that we registered. So just wanted to put that out there real quickly. Also, there's a lot of concern about, should I use a .net, a .com, or one of the newer GTLDs as they're called. Really, it's completely up to you. They all still have the same ability to rank in search engines. So yeah, that's completely a subjective preference. We're going to use Adobe Illustrator. You don't have to use Adobe Illustrator. Use anything that's vector capable, essentially. So I just leave it here at 1024 by 1024. It doesn't really matter what you choose. You can always just click on this little icon here, the artboard tool, and hold Alt, and you can drag this out to fit your whatever your resolution is of your monitor. And for this, for me right here, this is nice and filled out and it works well. Now, when it comes to most identity designers, I can only speak personally. I personally like just hopping right into the computer instead of, taking pencil or paper and, and just drafting out ideas. It's the same concept. If you want to do it here on the computer first, that's fine. Just know that a lot of people prefer, sketching to hand because it's pretty quick. But for me, the type of logos I like to design, they're usually very simple. And so working here on a computer, and plus, if you're familiar with the tools and the shortcuts, it makes it quite easy anyway. So the name is Moon Coins. So the first thing I do is just get out the type tool. And usually I do 3 variations. I'll do Moon Coins, kind of like title case. Now let me go ahead and expand this, Shift Alt and just left click and drag. So I'll do Moon Coins, and then in the same layer, text layer here, I'll do Moon Coins, and then also do Moon Coins. That way I kind of have a lot of iterations that I can look at when I'm start to filter through the different typefaces. Just going up and down, but it really wouldn't be true DesignCourse, Gary Simon fashion if I just chose some type of random font. I go through font phases, and for many of you know, for a long time I was using Montserrat, but now I've been using Poppins lately. You just can't go wrong with Poppins, in my opinion, right now. It is so 2021. So I like Poppins, and we're gonna fatten this thing up. Bold, look at that. Now, personally, any 3 of these could work. I mean, you can clearly read the type, or the word mark as it's called, the word mark portion. And so really for a lot of this, it comes down to subjectivity and personal opinion. For me, we're just gonna stick with the title case. It's bold, it stands out, it's making a statement, because cryptocurrency is a serious business for people that live in their basements. Anyhow, so Moon Coins. What I personally love word marks. I really don't like to create. It's not that I don't like to. I think I just like word marks more than using what's called combination logos, where you have a separate symbol and then you have the name. I like just a simple single element. Of course, having a combination logo with its own unique symbolism has its advantages because you can use it in places where you don't have enough room, perhaps, for the actual word mark. But for me, what I usually like to do is I look at the letter forms first and the shapes that I have to work with in relation to the purpose of the business and the company and what you want to say in a visual manner. And think if I could come up with a unique idea to work with the letters here. So Moon Coins. At this point, it's a pretty good idea to come up with kind of like a mood board of ideas and thoughts and just objects, perhaps, or abstract thoughts, and that you can convey visually in the logo through the letter forms. So Moon Coins. So right off the bat, we have moon and then we have coins. It's in the name. Wow. But there's so many other ideas. Like a person using this is somebody who is interested in money. They're interested in growth. So that's a few more things. So money, coins, kind of the same thing, but we have the moon, we have growth, we have profit, the idea of profit. We have colors that we can start to, think about as well. Money, green, whatever. You don't have to use that. So one of the things that I thinking of right away is the moon. The moon's a very simple thing to portray. It's a circle, and sometimes it's a crescent, right? Actually, most of the time it's some sort of crescent. It's not a perfect circle. And so we have 3 of those. We have a moon here, possibly, a moon here, and then a moon here. And looking at this, my initial idea is, well, moon is moon, right? That says moon already. But the coins, we have a single O in there that perhaps we can turn into a moon. So that's my initial thought here right away. So let's do that. So we have moon coins here, and I like to Control-C, Control-F just to create a copy over here. Put this up here in case I want to go back to it. And we're going to convert this to outline. So right now this is editable text if you double click into it. Well, we don't want that because then we can't really play with it too much in terms of adjusting the anchor points and all that. So Control-Shift-O turns it to outline. So no longer can you click and change the type. However, you can take your direct selection tool and now we can move stuff around and play with it and blah, 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 blah. All right, so because we want a perfect circle for our moon, we're not going to rely on this O right here because it might not be a perfect circle. It looks like it is. Now, when it comes to Illustrator, you can find the center with these little helpful areas, these guidelines. And you can see it's not a perfect circle from that O. So hold Shift, Alt, and just drag that up with the ellipse tool. Now we have to get rid of the O that's behind it. Now, when you convert a piece of text, a type later, to outlines, it adds them all into a group. So there's a couple ways you can go about removing that O. We can expand this and we can see the O right here. We can delete it, which is what we're going to do. You can also, by the way, I'll undelete it by hitting Control-Z. We can select everything, right click and ungroup. And then we can hide this. And now we can just delete that O. So you have options. And if you wanted to make them a group again, Control-G by selecting all, or after selecting all. So now we have moon coins. Guess what, people? This could completely work as a logo. Extremely simple. I mean, think about all of the the top businesses that you know of. Do they have crazy logos that are, you know, just the tons of lines and whatever? Yes, some of them do, like Starbucks, you know, with that person angel thing. I don't know what she's referred to as. I don't really eat at Starbucks. But you know what I mean. Most of the time, businesses rely on simple logos that make a strong, unique statement in some, like I said, unique way. Moon coins. People immediately are going to think of the moon, I think, and or a coin just by this really filled out perfect circle. But this wouldn't be that much of a logo tutorial if I just ended there, but just know that this could completely work. All right. So let's work in the idea of a crescent. Well, what I will do at this point, because this is a concept, we'll copy this. I'm going to put this up here too. All right. I'm just going to stick these over here. You could put them up outside as well, which I think maybe we'll do. There we go. So we can always come back to this one, present it to a client if you're working with a client or whatever, or present it to a focus group of whatever. So let's take this a little bit one step further. Let's go ahead and try to create like a crescent. All right. How would we do that? Well, Control-C, Control-F. So now we have a duplicate. We'll use the background. All right. So let's hold Shift. Or we'll just move it. So we can just use our up and down arrow keys. We want to keep this on a 45-degree angle. So we'll just go upright, 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 upright a few times. All right. So now we have a crescent, right? That looks pretty cool. All right. So let's go ahead and we're going to get a Pathfinder, window in Pathfinder. So the Pathfinder allows you to create certain operations with multiple paths selected. All right, so if we select both of these paths, I don't want this part overhanging. I only want the perfect circle, but with this thing being intersected. So here's what I mean. We select both of them, and we're going to choose, under Pathfinder, we're going to choose Divide. Doesn't seem like anything happened, but now we could take our direct selection tool and just delete this part right here. And now we have a white portion that's part of that perfect circle, and then this black portion. Now, you could delete this as well if you decided you completely, I don't want that there. Or we can bring it back and maybe play with it further with some other ideas. For moon coins, let's say, for instance, we like this. I mean, this could work as well. So if we bring back this one over here, you can see we have just a different play on the shape of the moon, but people can still see and would still understand that this says this is a representative of an O because C-O-I-N-S. So that could work as well. So this is kind of like the full moon, right? All right. So we can consider this a concept. And let's go ahead right off the bat and give this color. So let's take just this right here with the direct selection tool. And I think we're just going to use like a purplish color. Now, if that ends up happening and turns it gray, just go to Window, Colors, and then come down here on this little menu and choose RGB. All right, so now let's go back here. Is it not changing the color the way that I want it to? I said RGB, did I not? We are at RGB, All right. Yeah, something similar to that will work. All right, so that works. You could also possibly do the same thing here or create a second version of this where you're using, hit the I, the same, you're just simply changing the color of just the circle. So it's all obviously up to you. So here's another logo that we can use. So this is a concept that could completely be used. Now, you would definitely want to delete this for this logo because there's no purpose in having that there, the white portion. All right, so let's continue on. What else could we do with this logo? Well, one idea that I had, and it was an idea that came from an accident really, is this O right here. Earlier, it was kind of like, by accident, it was up into this area a little bit earlier in the video. I noticed that. So what if we tried to do something different where we kind of show in the negative space or the empty space in O between the C and the I. Let me tell you what I'm talking about because I might be losing some of you. Let's get a perfect circle here, starting right there. Okay, so that's not perfect. Actually, you know what we can do instead of that? Let's just take this, Control C, Control F. All right, and then just make it white, okay? And now what we'll do is we're gonna take the INS, we're gonna move it in a little bit. We're gonna take the moon and C, move that in a little bit, and let's go all the way to like right there. Okay. All right. So now we have something possibly interesting. Of course, I kind of you should always make sure that you're at this point. Maybe it's not worth it to worry too much about color. So just making them black again might help situations and then after you have the actual concept, you can worry about color. I mean, ultimately it's up to you. So that looks pretty cool. This is another concept. So all these concepts, and of course we want to clean this up and get this, situated correctly, because obviously it's not transparent as you can see here. But we don't have to worry about that right now too much. Just put it right here. And then what other things could we do? Well, let's delete this one. And perhaps, what does a moon look like? Well, how is a moon sometimes representative in a simple fashion? Sometimes it looks like Swiss cheese, right? So let's try doing just a few perfect circles. Shift Alt and drag out with the ellipse tool. Make these black. Maybe make 2 more that are smaller. Let me move these around. All right, so take this one, and this one. Maybe just position them up a little bit differently. So that right there, I kind of like as well as a potential concept. All right, so now we have all of these concepts that we can now, put in their own artboards, put them next to each other, just give as many looks as possible to see what people think. All right, and ultimately it then becomes, a situation where you can ultimately determine which one you're going to go with. So for me, out of all of these, I'll bring them all back. Let's see here. We'll bring this over here. Bring these over here. Oops. Let me make sure I select all of these. And for me, I really like this one. It's really simple. It's unique. And that's the one we're going to go with. So what we'll do at this point is I'm going to get out just a new document. So I'm copying all those. I Control-C, selected copy. We're going to hit Control-N to create. And we're just going to paste this here. And now we need to do some cleanup work because this is not a transparent logo. So I know that the interface I want to design is going to be dark by default. So let's just get this out here, and then let's choose some darker color or something. So we see this right now, and that just does not look good at all. So what we want to do is take all of this. Well, actually, just to make life easier, I'll take those, and then this. We're just taking all the black type right here. Make sure this is not selected as well, and we're going to make it white, because that will be the actual colors afterwards. And then what we'll do is we need to take this circular shape, and we need to be able to cut this out of this area. So first what we'll do, because it's a compound path here, we want to choose Unite. So that just makes it into a single path that is a perfect circle. Now what we want to do is I'm going to create a couple copies of this. Just Control-C, Control-F. And I'm going to take the top one, and then just in relation to the C, we're going to minus front. All right. We're going to bring back the other one, take this one on the I, and then we'll do the same thing, minus front, and there we go. Now that is a complete empty area. We can make this white. And there's our logo. Look at that. All right, so now what I want to do is, because we're going to be using this as an SVG asset when we get into the front-end development process, we'll scale this up to match it here, which is our artboard tool. And we'll get this all aligned. There we go. Now we don't want this. So now it's just completely empty because it's white on white, although this has no background, it's just white by default. And now we'll be able to use this as we wish. So we could probably group those up too. All right, we have 2 more paths. What are these paths? Oh, okay. For some reason, it says it's showing these up as black. We could probably take everything else and just group them up. And there we go. That is our logo. So now we want to go ahead and actually save this. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go to my code folder. All right, users, StreamMake, code, and we're going to create a new folder for our project. Actually, no, we're not going to create a folder yet. We're going to save this elsewhere, and I think I'll just save it on my desktop. So what we'll do is I'm just going to call this for now. You obviously want to say the AI version of it. We'll just call this Moon Coins right here. And then we'll also save as an SVG, mooncoins.svg. And then when the reason I didn't create the folder is because we're going to use the Vue CLI to create it for us. So there's that. Okay, so that is it for the logo. Let's go ahead and focus on now the front-end development process. All right, so here's Adobe XD. You can use Figma for this. We're not actually going to get into hardly any prototyping, just the design. So you can use any design application. This is going to be very simple. So we're going to create a Web 1920 for this. And for me, when I design, I like to start off with desktop first. That way, I can design for the full experience right away. And if it's really simple, sometimes I won't even bother with doing a mobile variation. I'm not sure if we're going to do that here, but just for now, let's start with the actual desktop version here, a full Web 1920. So one of the first things I like to consider, obviously at this point, is the background color. This is the only thing that we have to work with really at this point. So it could be all white. You can determine if you want to go, white or light or dark, or obviously give them the option to have a dark mode or whatever. For me, I just kind of want to make this darker by default. All right, so what I'll do is get our hue first up here. I don't like going all the way full black. Now, sometimes you can go, dark, like real dark, like that. And you can completely desaturate it, in which case, which point the hue that you're using doesn't really matter. But we can just give it a little bit of color. Maybe right around there. So the color code for that is 26292C. We can add it here to the color palette. And there we go. Now, let's go ahead and import or drag in our SVG. Look how cool that looks. Love it. Very simple. Moon coins. Shift-Alt, scale that sucker down. Now, 99% of the apps you create will probably have a navigation of some sort because you'll have multiple pages. For us, this is a single page app. I don't even care about having navigation. In that case, we're just going to center it up here at the top with good white space from the top. Otherwise, the standard convention is to stick it over here on the left. But for us, we don't have anything going to the right because we don't have a nav. So we're just going to stick with it in this context. Moon coins. Okay, so now what comes next? So think, what is it that we want to achieve? We want to allow people to track coins very easily. So we're going to have a single call to action, and that call to action is going to be a form. The form is just going to be the abbreviation of the coin that they want to add with a button to add it. That's it. So we're going to make it look good and make it easy to use as much as possible. So we're going to take the rectangle tool, and I'm just going to come in the center and hold Alt. And again, we only want like a 3-letter, 4-letter acronym at most, or it doesn't have to be an acronym, but just an abbreviation rather. So we don't have to have something that's real wide. That would not make sense, and it would be annoying. So somewhere, I would say no larger than this, maybe even a little bit smaller. And then we're going to take these little border radius handles and just drag them in a little bit. You don't have to do that, but I like to have a little bit of border here. So let's go ahead and get rid of that border. What I mean is I like to have a little bit of that border radius, the rounded edges. And then we can have a button over here. So Control D. Let's move these back to the center. And we have a button. So our button should be our primary color. All right. So whatever we've determined to be our primary color, we will use. So I already have a color that's picked out, and it's on my other monitor. There we go. So I've got the hex code, and I'm just going to paste it in. It's 9100FF if you're following along. Wait a second. There we go. It's this color right here. It's a nice sort of purple/blue, and it's just kind of right in the middle of those two. And let's go ahead and get our type here for the button text. And we're just going to make it nice, simple, easy. We're going to make it white, and we're going to center it, and then we're going to make it bold. All right, add. Let's use pop-ins and get this with our keyboard arrow keys centered up perfectly, vertically and horizontally. Now, we could just leave it like this with the space, but what I want to do is take both of these, put them like this, and then what we'll do is get rid of the corners on the right, top right and bottom right of this, and then the top left and bottom left of this button. So to do that, we click over here. So I believe it will be this one that goes to 0, and then this one goes to 0. So now we only have two sides that are like that. We'll take this one and the same concept. So this, nope, there we go, those two. So now we can just join them, and it makes it feel like it's, you know, just a little bit more of a unified form right here. Now we can also put in, I always advise putting in a label. So we're going to put crypto. And it's worth it to have more white space between these two elements. Otherwise you get too close and it just gets a little bit cluttered looking. So crypto, I think that size is pretty good. We could probably go 18. All right, and we can even have a placeholder value, or we can design for one at least. We'll put all caps BTC for Bitcoin. I don't want to make this bold, so we'll just do regular. And we'll make this bigger because we have the space. Maybe we'll make this light. Let's see here. Light, there we go. And maybe just come down a little bit lighter here. All right, and then we can also have a little bit of a helper, a little note underneath. Use, oops, that's the SpongeBob. I was about to type use abbreviations, dude. If I could type that, okay. Use abbreviations. Now, what's the problem here? Lack of visual hierarchy, because use abbreviations is styled exactly same as the label. So we need to, the label is much more important than this little note down here. So we need to emphasize that visually. So we're gonna make this smaller, maybe like 14, not bold, maybe like regular. And then we can decrease the contrast as well. So we're changing 3 different things about it. What I like to do in these cases is take the same background color and then just come up here a little bit. Now, you want to make sure, I'm going to use my stark contrast color checker to make sure I'm using at least the minimum contrast. So what we can do is click stark, check contrast, and it's not good enough. It's 3.14. And then they also have a dedicated panel. So if we go over here to the plugins, we go back and we do stark. All right, so now we have this up here and we can come up a little bit more. And you'll see it's rising, 4.16. Oh, no, we need to go a little bit more. There's 4.6. I think that's pretty good right around there. All right, so right around there is pretty good for our form. Make sure everything is like centered up here. All right, so now underneath, we're gonna go ahead and actually design for our each little panel, and we're gonna do these in cards. So Bitcoin will be here, You know, Ethereum could be here, IOTA here, you know, whatever. So let's do that. So we're going to start somewhere, anywhere. And just drag out an area like that. Keep your corners, radiuses, if you have any consistent. We're at 7 here, so let's use 7 here as well. And if these were all white, those cards would, I mean, that's a lot of high contrast area. I personally, in these situations, get rid of that border, I like to do that trick where we take the background color and just come up real slightly. Like something like that. Maybe right around there. So that color code here is 32373C. And now what we'll do, and for this initial one, let's just put it in the center. Wow, is that like the exact same size? Did I use the same exact width? Is that insane or what? That is crazy. It's almost, oh, there's like 1 pixel over here. All right, things that amuse me. Okay, so we're just gonna say we're only interested in a price and the acronym name. That's it, and the ability to delete it. So let's come out here, left click, we'll center this, and we'll say, I don't know what it is right now. I think it was like 47,488 and 85 cents. No, that's actually what it is, or at least a few minutes ago. So we're gonna make this nice, big and beefy and bold, all right? So we'll make it white. Maybe we'll make it light. Wait, that's not that light. I thought that was like way lighter. Maybe I'm trying to go extra light. Yeah, that's fine with me. All right, so that's good. Maybe right around there is good. And then we're gonna duplicate it. And I guess underneath it is where we can put the name of the cryptocurrency. So we're gonna make it bold, but we're gonna make it smaller. And maybe we'll even make it the same color and then do that little trick where we come up in the same hue. Yeah, that's looking pretty good to me. Maybe make this one slightly larger. All right, I like that. Now you could just do this and be done with it. But let's do something a little bit different. Let's take, let's duplicate that. And take both of these, put them up. This will have to come down. All right, so we're gonna make this slightly darker. Like right around, I'm getting a little bit closer just to see. Let me get the same color again. I mean, I'm talking very subtle. I like that. So that color code, if you're following along, is 292D30. All right. So now we'll take these corner rays. I don't want them right here on the top left or right. So 0 there and 0 there. Then we can take this up. Take this one up to just, well, this can go up anywhere as long as it's underneath it. And then a little trash icon perhaps so that we can delete it. All right, so there's another, I think it's called icons for design. Delete. All right, and we can just choose this one. We click on it and then we have an icon ready to go so that we don't have to design it from scratch. All right, so we'll make this white. And maybe we'll just stick it right here. Now, I didn't think too much about this design. There could be probably a better way to do this. But, you know, it's good. It's good for me. So now we can take this repeat grid. Let's put this over here. Drag this down. And then who knows? You have however many different coins This particular person is tracking many different coins, obviously, and each one of these would be a different coin. So to implement this, we'd really have to think now we have to put it on the front-end developer hat, or the role, and think about how we're actually going to do this. So that's going to be the next section. So at this point, there are many different ways and different paths that you can choose in order to make our design that we created here in Adobe XD an actual functioning product in the browser and on different devices. Like I said, there's many. We're going to use a JavaScript framework, and really there's 3 or 4 big ones. Really there's the big 3. There's Vue, there's React, and there's Angular. React is the most popular. I personally, I used it a few times, that's all. I didn't like it. The templating was weird to me. I really like Vue, and I liked Angular as well, but really lately I've just used Vue whenever I do a project. And you could just use neither of them, not use any framework, and really for a simple project like this, it would probably be advisable. But I did want to just use a framework. That way you can kind of get more of the full experience, especially with a larger project. You would probably benefit from using something like React or Vue or Angular or Svelte or whatever. And so we're going to use the Vue CLI, and this is a tool that just allows us to get a Vue project up and running real quickly. All right, so you're going to need npm or yarn installed. Just to show you, make this a little bit larger, because we need to, in order to install the Vue CLI, you have to be able to run these npm or the yarn command. All right, so that's the first thing you want to do. We're going to open up, let me move this out of the way, and use Visual Studio Code as the code editor. There's a lot of different code editors you can use, but for us, we're going to use this. Now, it's also free. It's from Microsoft. You can download it and install it. So we're going to go to Terminal and New Terminal, and this is where we're going to install Vue. So first, make sure that you have Yarn or Node.js installed, js.org. And so now we can go to Downloads, and you can install it here. Restart your terminal or your Visual Studio Code, and you'll be able to install it. When you install it, make sure that you install the Node Package Manager as well. I think that's enabled by default, which is npm, and that's the command that we want. So then you can just do node-v, npm-v, and there you go. All right, so as long as those show up and it doesn't say like unrecognized command, then you're ready to rock. All right, CLS will clear out the console, and we're going to go ahead and install it here. So make sure you run this command and it will install it. And then after, because I've already installed it, you can run this right here. So Vue create and then the name of your project. First, make sure you go into wherever you store your projects. I have a folder called code in my users folder. So I can cd into that. If you don't have a code folder and you want to store it there, just go type in make dir, mkdir, and then code. Hit enter. So cd code. And then we're going to run that command, Vue create moon coins. Now it's going to give us a prompt with a few different questions. All right, so we're going to use the Vue 3 preview. Now, of course, these might change, these options here based on what you're doing, based on when you're watching the tutorial. But this doesn't take too long, and it will just install a ton of different files that makes Vue Vue. You like that explanation? Oh my God. It's been a while since I've done a coding tutorial. But anyhow, I guess at this point, I'm not going to keep on talking, and I'll just fast forward the situation. All right, it's done. And now we can type in cd moon coins. All right, hopefully you can see that. And if I make this a little bit bigger, there we go. It's stating that to run this, we can run yarn serve. You'd have to have yarn installed. We can do that anyhow. Yarn serve. And it's going to start a development server. And in a second, right now it's compiling, and now we can just hit Control and then left click, and this is our Vue.js app. It's ready to go. So hopefully you're able to get to this point. If you have so far, then you're ready to rock. All right. So let's go ahead and let's close that out, and let's focus on just the templating or the HTML and CSS just to get us to a point where we have some dummy, template data that will ultimately look like this. So let's go ahead and close this out. We're going to click over here, and what we want to do is open folder, and we want to go to our code folder, Moon Coins, and then select that folder. All right, so this is our project, all right? So we can get rid of this welcome. And everything, you're mainly gonna be working here in source. Source app, this is where that welcome to your Vue.js app was, and it's pulling a component from here called Hello World. We're just gonna be working in a single, the app.view right here, just to make things ultra simple. In a real app, you would wanna be compartmentalizing things into different components as much as possible. For us, we're just gonna, because it's so simple, we're just gonna do all of our logic and all the templating and all the CSS within the single app.view right here. So let's go ahead and write out the HTML. So obviously before you can do the CSS, you need to focus on the HTML. And so for that, that's a process where I like to go back and forth between our mockup, in our case it happens to be with Adobe XD, in the HTML. Let me make that a little bit larger. So if I refer back to this, we have to ask ourselves, what is the first thing that shows up from left, right, top, bottom? It is this right here, this logo. What's that mean? We have to export this, although it is already exported as SVG right here. So I'm just going to copy that, and we're going to put this in the assets folder. So we're going to right click, reveal in File Explorer, double click into it, and then just do Moon Coins. I guess we could just delete this logo and then just make that logo. There we go. So now that becomes our logo. Now, of course, if we did this SVG and we looked at our browser, we won't see it. Oh, that's the reason this isn't working, I believe, is because we opened this up and the new terminal was, so we just do yarn serve, and we'll be back up and running here in just a second. There we go. So we don't see it because it's white on white. So going back here, we have our app.view. Now, when we close that little terminal window out, it's still running. So you can just bring it back as you wish. So view terminal, and there we go. You can see it's still running, but we want to save space here. So now what we can do is just delete that stuff, and we're gonna have a div here. That's, let's see here, I'm looking at my reference code real quickly. Yeah, so you always have to have an opening div tag when it comes to Vue, and then everything else can go inside of it. So we're gonna have a div of container right here. Oops, not container. All right, and so I always just like to do that. And so going back here, the container is just gonna be something that holds all this stuff right here. It's just gonna be strictly for the purpose of keeping everything confined into an area. And so most of my designs have, or layouts rather, have just an opening container div. And then the next thing that will show up is the actual logo. So inside of div class container is going to be a link that's not going to go anywhere. Although really it should go to your home page. So in our case, it's going to be https mooncoins.net. All right, and then we're gonna have an image, and I'm using abbreviations, so sometimes you'll see me type in this and then hit enter. It just makes your life easier instead of having to type all this out by hand. So then inside of here, we're going to put in @/assets and then the name of logo.svg and our alt tag, which is a required attribute for the image element. We're just going to say logo. All right. So that looks good right there. So now at this point, did I forget to do something? Let's see. Failed to compile. Oh, it's registered but not used. All right. So what that means is we imported this, but it's not being used because I deleted it up there. So if we go back to this, now we have this blank screen that we cannot see anything. So let's get the actual background color so we can start seeing what we're doing. And so we'll do this in the style section. So when it comes to Vue and their components, you have 3 different areas. You have the template, which is like the HTML. You have the script, which is the logic done with JavaScript or TypeScript. And then we have right here the styling, which styles the HTML elements up there. For us, we're going to delete that. And we're going to simply focus on just a couple rule sets. The first one, before I forget, I do this on every single one of my CSS files, is just choose all. You can also use a pseudo selector before and after, I believe. And we're going to do box sizing border box. And basically that's this asterisk of all basically means apply this property, the CSS property and value to every element. And it just happens, it has to do with your margins and your padding. It can throw off the layout when they're set at 100% and you have margin or padding. So I just add that anyhow. Not important to really understand right now. And we're going to give ourselves a background though, just that way we can see what we're doing. So the background color that we're using is right here, 24262A. And now at this point, when we save it, there it is. Look how massive that is. Don't worry, that will be fixed. But now at least we have something working. So let's continue on. What comes after, if we refer back to our template, it is this. It is this form right here. So we need to account for that now. So what we'll do is, looking at my reference, we're going to create a form. So this is going to be just underneath our logo. So the form action, we're not going to use the action attribute. We're going to put @submit, prevent, handle, submit, form. All right, so this is right here. This is going to be a method that we call in order to essentially handle the form data, which is just going to be the cryptocurrency that the person wants to add. Inside of here, we're going to have a label. For is going to be in reference to the actual input element. So for is going to be, we'll just say crypto. And then this label is going to be crypto. And then we're going to have, actually, you know what? I screwed up. We need to have a form group up here. Period form group. That's an M abbreviation. It'll create that div for us. Yeah, because I believe we do style this in CSS anyhow, so we want to add that for sure. And then also a form group inner. And you'll see when you get to the CSS, you'll understand why I'm adding these various div elements. For now, we just need to get it out. Input type is going to be text. The class here is going to be crypto. And then we're going to use the v model crypto.name. Placeholder is going to be, let's just say Bitcoin, which is what we designed for. And then we're going to make this required. And then inside of here, we're going to have a button with a class of add and then a label of add. And that's all we need for that. And then finally, we have over here, if we go back, we have this use abbreviations. So we're going to have a paragraph and the class is going to be info. Use abbreviations. Wait, nope. There we go. Type, Gary, type. All right. So the reason I have this form group inner right here, just to give a quick exclamation, is so that we can just be able to float them basically left of each other. I'm not going to float, but you know what I mean. They're going to be situated side by side. All right, so then we finally have this area right here. So we're just going to create the HTML markup for just one of these cards. And then we'll iterate through those with logic later on. So now, after the form, the closing form tag, we're going to go ahead and create a new element, a div element, with a class of crypto container. All right. Inside of there, we're going to have a div class called crypts. And this is going to be the element so the crypto container is basically going to be kind of like our container div, but it's going to be a container that just contains all of this stuff. So one big square that contains all that. Then crypts is going to be the actual card that gets repeated, if that makes sense. Probably doesn't. So inside of there, we're going to have a paragraph of class price, so p.price, the abbreviation. And so we're just going to put in a fake price for now. We're going to hard code it in, like 48,000, 00. And then we also have, we're going to have, if you look at our cards, we have this little box down here. And we'll say the price is inside of that box. So if I double click this, initially it might look like this, but then we'll use CSS to push it up in the middle. And then it also has this delete. So we have to create a parent container for those. And so we're just gonna call it lower. And inside of lower, we'll have a paragraph of class crypto label. All right, and that'll be like BTC for Bitcoin. Again, this is gonna be, that's all hard coded in right now. We'll make it dynamic soon. And then also a button for our delete button, our delete icon. So I click prevent. So that means it's going to prevent the form from submitting and refreshing the browser, because you don't want that. And it's going to send it to a method that we're going to create called delete crypto. And we're going to pass in the name to it. Now at this point, it's probably going to fail if we try to run this. So at this point, I'm just going to remove that. Instead, we're just going to give it a class of delete-btn. And then we're going to put an actual image inside of here, which is our delete icon. Now, I already have that icon exported. You can export it from XD or Figma or whatever you're using, whatever you need to. But I'm going to go ahead and just grab the delete icon here. We're going to go to code, into Mooncoins, source, assets, and paste in delete.png. So now we can reference this is going to be an image inside of the button element. And this is @assets and delete.png. Ideally, that would be a SVG, but for some reason it was a PNG that icon plugin used, but no big deal. So we'll just put delete crypto for the alt, and there we go. That, my friends, is all of the logic, or not the logic, the HTML templating. If we go look at the browser right now, it's going to be, well, absent apparently, and that's because we have an issue. And that's why right here, V model, we're going to add that in later. And now we can see there's no more errors. And this is what our design looks like. So whenever you're doing the HTML, it always looks like garbage until you get to the CSS. But you need the HTML markup before you can get to the CSS. Unless you're doing like a little bit of HTML and then you're switching to CSS. I mean, you could do it that way, but I prefer just to get all the HTML markup done and then switch to CSS. So ultimately, it's all up to you. So what I'm going to do to make our process here of the CSS portion, part of the full stack development process, easier is just to take our browser and kind of simulate like a phone width or a device width like this, because we want to do mobile first CSS. So what that means is we want to make sure the design looks good when we're writing our CSS by default on the smallest device possible. The reason we do this is because you're not working with any media queries yet, which you'll see what that is in a bit. And it really just simplifies your initial CSS, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead, and then I'm going to take this. There we go. So now we have two side by side, and we have the hot reloading so that we can, every time we save a change here, it's going to refresh this. Our goal is to get this to look not like this, because I did not do a mobile version, but something that, this has the ability to, become in a very simple manner. And all this is going to be, this stuff's going to stay the same, because look how the width is. It's very small. But this, what this will become is, if I just delete these, like on a real small device, it might just look like that. So then we could take this in and emulate, what it would look like on a small, on a phone. So that's our goal right here. All right. I'm going to go back though and undo that. So let's go and start focusing on our CSS. So now we have some work to do in our body. So we're going to take all the colors, just make them white. As you can see, everything gets updated. We're going to set a margin to 0 because there's the default a little bit of margin here around the viewport that the browsers automatically add. So I'm just setting this to 0 so I can add my own, work my own white space in. Height, 100 viewport height. I always like to do this. Probably don't need to do this for this context. Font family, we're going to do Poppins. So when you're just practicing and you're using if this is your own little project, no one's going to see it. You don't have to, if you have the font already installed on your machine locally, you don't have to import it. But because this is going to be something that's on the web, we're going to go ahead and import it. So how do you do that? So it is a web font from Google that we can use, available on Google, fonts.google.com. And we type in Poppins, Mary Poppins. All right. And so I'm an idiot. I'll be quiet. We want a few different font weights. I think we want extra light. We're going to select that. And then we want light, and then we want bold. 700. So we have 3 different styles. We're going to import it. Copy this right here. And then get out of there. And then just import right there. Now, people don't need to have it installed. This will download it for those who don't have it installed. All right. So now, that's it for the body element. Let's focus on the logo. Obviously, the logo is way too big, so we need to fix that. So what we'll do is, let's see here. Now, initially, when I was creating this project, for my reference code, I didn't have the logo. I was just using text instead of an image inside of the anchor link. So I'm going to have to do this off the cuff, so to speak. So how do we want to do this? We could hard code the actual width of the logo, like using absolute values or just M values. So we could do something like width. I don't know. What is 5 M units going to look like? Oh no, it is not working. All right, let's figure this out. Oh, there's no class here. So the image, we can just do class equals logo. Now that's way too small. That's too big. Let's just say 10 M. I mean, you can, yeah, that'll be good. The advantage to using like a relative unit like M or whatever is for responsive design. M units based on the font size that's on the body element. Now, browsers automatically add a font size of 16 pixels. If we change the font size on the body element, for instance, to like 25 pixels or something big, watch what happens to the logo. It gets big as well as everything else. And that's helpful for responsive design when you get to media queries and you just want to enlarge everything or most of the things. This will help when you're using like M and REM units. because otherwise, if this was like 100 pixels and we remove this, notice it's going to stay the same exact size no matter what that font size is. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Let me go back here, 10M units. We'll leave that off, and that looks good. All right, so what we want now is we want some white space. So we're going to get back to the logo in a second, but we want to reference our container. So remember, our container element is like the first div element after that element right there. And so the container is what I like to give and define the white space of everything. The white space is not going to be too important at this point in time because what we can do is text align center everything, and that's going to give us white space on the right and left for the most part. So if I do text align center, now we have good white space on the sides, obviously, but not the top. So we're also going to do margin 0 and 1 M unit. So, oh wait, that's not right. I don't want to screw up my code because the fact that I didn't use this up here initially is screwing things up. So we'll give the white space by adding the margin on the actual logo itself up top. So I'll just say 3 M units and 0. So top and bottom will be 3 M units. That'll be good enough for now right here. Okay, so after that, we're going to have, let's see here. We have a form group element right here. That's really the next element. You don't really target the form itself most of the time. We're just going to use form group right here. So for form group, we're going to text align left because it's currently centered based on its parent being text align center. And we're going to do width of we're going to hard code 300 pixels in here. And then we're also going to do margin 7 M units on the top and bottom, and then auto on the right and left, which will center it. Okay. I'm probably going to take our logo and put 0 on the bottom. There we go. Because that was pushing it out way too far. So next up, let's focus on our label right here. So we'll do label, and our label will be font weight bold. Margin bottom will be 0.7 M units. And then we'll display block here. That way the margin will work. All right, so looking good so far. We're getting there. Next up is going to be the input itself. All right, so with our input, we need to beef that thing up with white space inside of it. So margins outside of an element, padding is on the inside to increase white space. So padding is going to be 1 M unit all around, top right, bottom left. There we go. And then outline is going to be none. Like if you select in this, you see this little outline kinda. So if we save that, that doesn't happen anymore. The border is going to be none. And then we're going to do border, top left radius is 0.3 M units. We will shift alt down to replicate that. And then this is going to be bottom left. So now it's rounded out the bottom, top and left. And then we're going to choose font size 1.3 M units just to beef that up a little bit more. Now everything seems real large because I've zoomed it up. So let me just get back to 100% in the browser. Then we have form group inner, which is the parent element of this and this button, this ugly button right here, these two elements. So what we can do is display grid. Nothing changes there except it just expands everything out. And then we're going to do grid template columns, 100 pixels auto. And there we go. So now we have our thing here, and it's pretty big. It's bigger than in here, but I kind of just like this anyhow. So that'll work. Now our button. So it has an add class. So we'll just do add or button.add. Sometimes it's nice to specify the element as well. So we'll do font size 1 M unit, just to get it bigger. Font weight is going to be bold. Our color is going to be white. And our background color is 9100FF. Or border, we need none. Outline, none. Padding will be 1 M unit on the top and bottom, and 3 M units on the right and left. And then we have our border top right radius, which is going to be 0.3. And this is going to be top bottom right. Yeah, there we go. All right, so we're coming along. It is looking pretty good at this point. All right, so now we're going to do a paragraph, the info, because it wasn't white. We used a different color, which is right there. Copy that, color code, and we're just going to do font size is, oh, no font size for this. I was looking in the wrong area. Oops, put a double hash sign there. All right, and then there's our color. Awesome, so this part's done. Now we can start focusing on the actual crypto container, which is the next element right here. So crypto container, we're gonna make a grid, a CSS grid, and there's a really cool thing that you can do, which I can't demonstrate right now because we only have one of these elements, but the cards, it'll automatically make it responsive with one line, with essentially just a couple lines of CSS, a couple properties. And you'll see how that works in a second. It's going to be confusing though when I do this next property. Grid template columns. The value is what's kind of confusing here. Repeat, auto fit, min max, 340 pixels, and 1 fractional unit. Now I did a whole entire video explaining what this does, and I'll try to remember it. If I don't remember to put it in the description, go to my channel, click on search, and type in one CSS property responsive, and then you'll get a better understanding of exactly what's happening here, because I did do a whole video on this because it's so cool. Grid gap is going to be 1 M unit. All right, so obviously nothing changed, obviously, because we only have one of these elements in here, but you'll see what this does. It's very cool. So now what we'll do is we're going to do crypts, which is the actual individual card, and that's the part that's going to get repeated. And we're going to use a background color here. Actually, I should use the one from the one I created. Let's see here. Copy that. All right, there's that. And then we have our price inside of it. So the price is going to be a font size of 3 M units, font weight of 200, and padding of 0.1 M units. So top and bottom, 0, right and left, 1 M unit. There we go. Then we have the lower right here. So lower has its own background as well, in which we will revert right here and copy that color code. So that's going to be background. Now you can see that slight difference. And then we're going to have a padding of 1 M unit. We're going to have a position relative and a height of 100 pixels. All right. And then crypto label. Is going to be text transform. So again, this is targeting this area right here. Is going to be uppercase. And what am I doing? There, I didn't spell it right. So just to make sure it's uppercase by default. And then we're going to do a font size and beef it up to 1.5 M units. We're going to font weight bold it. And then we're going to do a margin top of -1.5 M units. That gets it there in the center. Of course, I was experimenting with these values when I first created the project. By the way, for those of you who are wondering, why don't I just create this from scratch without having reference code? Some people feel like it's not real if I do that. Trust me, we fumble a lot, and it's just live coders do that, but people understand it. Usually it makes the process a lot longer. So many people, the top YouTubers like in this niche, it's always just makes sense to have the reference code because we're trying to sit here teach at the same time. All right, so margin top, -5. Then we have to give it its color too because it had its own color, and that will be right here. Copy that. And there's the color. All right, so now we just have to do that delete button, which is a class of delete btn. Background is going to be none, and border will be none. Position is going to be absolute. Right is going to be 1 munit, and bottom will be 1 munit. Cursor is going to be pointer because we don't get one with that way with button, and then outline will be none. And that's it. So that's all it is for our markup. We don't actually have any media queries for this design. So what we're going to do now, I probably should put a max width on this, but that's no big deal at this point. I think also I didn't put a border radius on these, but that's okay. You guys can do that too. Let's go ahead now and focus on actually making this work with the logic portion, which means we're going to be working a lot here within the script section. All right, so we need access to an API that will allow us to grab all of that, the data associated with the current prices and other information with the cryptocurrencies that a person wants to track or add. And so cryptocompare.com offers a great API. They offer a free one as well. I'm already a member. I've already created an account, and I already have access to my API keys. So basically, get your free API key, click that button so you have that all ready to go when the time comes. Now, in order to communicate with this API, you need an HTTP client library of some sort that allows you to communicate from your app back, to basically say the app will, our app will say, it's going to send a request designating different cryptocurrencies. Sorry, I'm being slow. Like BTC or ETH or whatever, or multiple. And then this will send us back the information so that we can display it in our template. So we're going to use a popular one called Axios. All right, so in order to do that, we're going to go to terminal. Let's just view our terminal right now. And we're going to click this plus to get a second terminal open. And they're both listed here now. And we want to install with npm Axios, not Axos. So we're going to run npm I Axios. And so that's going to install Axios with our current project. And once that's done, we're not really going to be communicating with it. I'm just trying to get some initial setup work going here anyhow. What we need also to consider is the fact that we need somewhere to store which cryptocurrencies a person has added. All right, so this is an area where you have multiple options as well. You could store them in a database that you control. You can use something called Firebase, which is offered by Google, and that's kind of like a database in the cloud where they store it. In that case, it would simplify your app greatly because then you don't have to create or use Express or anything as it's called. But we're going to use what's called Mongo. All right, it's a database that we can use and works well with Node.js applications. There's something in my eyeball, and so we need to create a folder, and we have to install a couple things in order for that to run. All right, so Is that thing still running? Jeez, what is happening? Let's get out of third console while we wait. And we're going to make dir backend. We're going to cd into it backend. All right. And then we're going to in npm init to initialize a package JSON file. I should have put -y because I'm just going to hit enter on all these. And then we have to install a few things. And now these few things, that don't be, I guess you say, don't be too intimidated by them. Pretty much everyone who creates like a Mongo backend, these are the packages that you install in order for it to work. So npm I, we're going to do body -parser. We're going to do cores. We're going to do express. And we're going to do mongoose, which is for MongoDB itself. So we're going to install all those. And that went really fast. All right, so this installed Axios as well, so we're good to go there. All right, and at that point, we're going to create a database.js file here in our backend folder right here. All right, so we'll create that database.js. All right, and we're going to put in module.exports equals an object with a property of DB for database, and we're going to put MongoDB /localhost 27017, and then we'll just name this here the name Mooncoins, like that. All right, so we're going to save that, and then back in our backend, we're going to, oh, and by the way, in order for this to work as well, you actually have to have MongoDB set up on our development, your environment on your computer. So let me get that out real quicko. MongoDB installation. All right, so I'm on Windows. Obviously, they'll have, if you go to install MongoDB, there's obviously a lot of, there's Mac OS. So you're going to have to install this first. And you have to also make sure that you have access to the Mongo commands via the command line. Also, I didn't realize how dark I was. It's got dark outside, so I just increased my light brightness. Anyhow, after that, we're going to create also inside of the backend folder, we're going to create what's called models, a models folder. And inside of that, we're going to create one called crypto. So when you add information to a database, you want to create a series of what are called models. And so I'm going to create one just called crypto. Ours is such a very simple purpose. And we're only storing one thing, literally, the name of the crypto. So it's going to be as simple as it could possibly be. So we're going to create a constant of mongoose, because we have to import that. So require mongoose, because we installed that earlier. And also the schema, we import that as well. And that is mongoose.schema. And then we say let crypto schema, new schema, inside of here. There we go. We're going to put a name, and that's going to be a type of string. All right. So you define basically all of the information that's going to be submitted as a part of this form. For us, it's just one property called the name. And then right here, we're going to put in collection is going to be called cryptos. Then one final line, we have to export this module exports with mongoose.model. We export it as crypto, and we pass in crypto schema, which is defined above. That's it for that part. So next up after that, we're going to go ahead and create another folder in our backend folder called routes. So inside of routes, we're going to have crypto.route.js. All right. So inside of here, we are going to have, this is where the main backend area of our coding ends up going. This is where we import Express, which is our server. And we're going to require Express right here. And then we're going to const crypto route will be express.router. And now we'll go ahead and reference the crypto model that we, or import it rather, that we created in the previous step. So we're going to let crypto model require, and then we reference the path of it, which is models crypto right here. And then we say crypto route, which we've imported above. We specify the route here is just going here to, this is where it's submitted. It's not to a specific URL. And then we put in the get method. We pass in the request and response. And here we say crypto model. And we put find, all right? So we're gonna put an error and data. All right, and then inside of here, we're gonna say if there's an error, return next error. So else, if it's successful, we return the response like this, which we'll catch. At this point, we can then just go ahead and, so this right here, all of this code is responsible for just basically getting the data that's already been submitted. Let's take this and copy it and paste it. So right here, this is going to be add crypto. All right, so it's going to look pretty much the same for the most part, except in here, we're going to, instead of using the find method, we're going to use the create method. All right, so let's update this stuff here as well. So let's delete this. This is going to be the request body and pass in error and data here. And if there's an error, where did next tick come from? That's funny. I didn't type that out. All right, so this is going to be the same thing. If error, return next error, and then else response JSON. All right, so this is saying request body. Oh, we have to put post as well, because when this URL is accessed from the Express backend, it's expecting this payload information. All right, and that is just going to be the crypto name. And then once it has that information, it's going to post to it. It's going to create that entry into the Mongo database essentially. And then this is just error handling here. So the request.body is the information that's going to be posted. And then finally, we're going to do one more of these routes, which is going to be delete. Instead of just, there's so many things I have to update. I'm going to do this from scratch. So model.route. This is going to be delete crypto, but we need to know which crypto ID that needs to be deleted. So we put a /ID right here. And then we're going to run delete and request, response, next. Open that up. And then we say crypto model dot find by ID and remove right there in this one. And what is it? So the first parameter is the request parameters as params.id, and then error data. And inside of here, it's all the same stuff essentially, for the most part, for the error at least. So let's do if error. Inside of here, we say return next error, just like we did above. But then this time we do else response. We're going to do status to 100 JSON, and we can put in message and data. So this is going to be passing in, returning otherwise a successful basically query, if you want to call it. And you can see that we have data right here, which is passed in right here. So let's go ahead and save that. And then one final line for all this to work is right there. So module exports crypto route. All right. I want to make sure. Oh, that's wrong. Crypto. I thought something looked funny. Crypto route. Okay, there we go. So we have 3 different things. Now, in a true CRUD app where you're doing create, read, update, delete, you would have a couple more of these. We're not doing the ability to update, although you could definitely work that in with like a little pen icon next to each of those cards. But yeah, just to keep this a little bit quicker, we're just doing something very, quite simple. And even something quite simple, if you've never worked with this before, is very complex at this point. All right, now finally, the last step is we have to actually create a app.js file for Express. That's going to kind of tie everything together that we just did here in the backend folder. So we're going to do app.js. And honestly, Express, I don't have a lot of experience in. There's quite a bit of code here. I'm just going to paste this in and we'll go over it in a pretty quick fashion. So looking at this, let me expand this out here. We're importing several different things, pretty much all the stuff that we installed several steps ago in the command line. So we have Express that we're including, Cores, Mongoose. We're importing the database here. One thing that I wanted to make a note of is in the database.js, when you first install Mongo, you don't have to, it doesn't force authentication. It's a very good practice, obviously, to move all this stuff into the connection string into an environment variable inside a .env file. And Sid is going to take care of doing that, being that I already created it. So that's just something to note. Then also this body parser. So first you connect to the database right here. And I'm not going to go over all this stuff. Basically, when you create an Express server, a lot of this stuff is boilerplate template stuff that you just worry about after. We have to specify our endpoint here. Inside the routes file right here. We're creating the endpoint as being API. This is the ports, all of this stuff. I'll be honest, when I initially typed this up, I got this from a tutorial anyways, and I just pasted it in. So a lot of this is set it and forget it. It's just boilerplate, and I'm good. When it comes to full stack development, this is one of my weak areas, I will completely be honest with, but it does work. So now that we've done all that, we can now actually run our Express server with our backend, and hopefully it all will connect up, which it probably won't. So we're going to go to terminal, new terminal. We'll get into our backend here, and we're going to write node app.js. All right, so we got an error. Cannot find module DB. That's because I named it database. All right, so database. Save that. Come back. Hit the up arrow key. Hit enter. Database couldn't be connected to. Invalid connection string. Or connection string is in database. And I forgot a colon. All right, Control C to stop that. Up arrow key, enter. Connected to port 4000, database connected. Yay, we are now good to go. So now at this point, let's hop back into the logic section of our app.js. So let's close this out. We're going to go to our app view, and now we're going to get in here into the script part, and we're going to import Axios right here at the top. And it's going to be Axios from Axios package that we installed. Export default. Our data, we're going to return a few things. Our base API URL, which is going to be HTTP localhost 4000 /API. We're going to define a couple properties here. So the first one's going to be name, because that's one of the things that we're going to be getting from the database here. We're also going to have cryptos as an array, and then also cryptos list as an object. And you'll see how these things come into play as we develop further here. So we have different lifecycle hooks that we can tie into, and the first one is created, and that Oops, I did not put that in the right spot. All right, we're going to put that right here. I believe it goes. So created basically means when this the app loads up, it's going to run this stuff. And so we're going to reference a function that we're going to create. So this dot get cryptos. All right. And then after this, we can define our methods. This is where most of our code's going to go. So we'll do get cryptos first. All right. So get cryptos. And inside of here is where we use Axios. So we're going to say axios.get this.base API URL, which we already defined. Then we take the response and we say this.cryptos, which we already created, equals the response data. All right. So at this point, it's probably worth doing a console log of our this cryptos. So let's see what ends up happening here. So if I save that, Control-Shift-I, we see it says proxy, array, 0. That's because there's nothing in our Mongo database because we haven't submitted anything yet. So we know that's working. That's great. At this point, we're just going to leave this here because let's go ahead and try to make it work to add the data that we want to add. So it's going to be handle form submit. And so that goes right after here. Now, why are we using that? Well, if you remember during the HTML process above in our form, handle submit form. I made that wrong. Handle form submit. No, it's handle submit form. There we go. And inside of here, we say Axios post this.base API URL. And we're going to add crypto. So that's one of the endpoints and the routes that defined in the backend folder. And so we pass in this crypto. So this .crypto is in reference to the form element, the text input field. And then we're going to say then .arrow function. Then we say console log this.crypto just to make sure it's all working. But then we do this we're not pushing anything though. And then we say this.crypto equals name. We basically reset it back to empty. And then we're going to call this.getCryptos, our function up here after we've added it. All right. And then we also want to catch any errors. Console log error. So let's see if this actually works. I'll be surprised if it does. That's how much confidence I have. All right, BTC, let's try adding Bitcoin as the very first one. Oh, this needs cursor pointer, by the way. All right, let's see what happens. All right, so what happened here? Array 1, name is empty. So we got, at least it did store something. It did store something, and we have an ID, but the name is empty. So let's figure that out. So I did, let's see here. So we're saying this dot crypto, all right. And let me make sure that I have this all matched up. Oh, that's why. Remember I had to take this out, it was erroring. vmodel crypto.name. Let's try that again. We're going to refresh. And this time we'll do ETH. There we go. Now it works. Name is ETH. There we go. All right, great. So now we have 2 of these. Let's go ahead and work with the template now to get them actually pulling this data. Actually, before we do that, we actually have to communicate with the crypto compare API. And we do that in get crypto. So basically at this point, we have to do a couple things. So this right here, this response data or this cryptos is an array of objects. And in order to communicate with crypto compare API, and by the way, now would be a good time to get the API documentation up. Why did it take me here? Let's see. Oh, documentation. So this is where it lets you know like all the stuff that you can essentially do. This is the get URL that we're going to use. You can get multiple symbols full price. We don't want a single symbol. We want multiple symbols price. And you can also get full data, which would honestly, in this case of the app, would make sense to get full data so that you can display more information on each of those cards. And maybe you can try that yourself. But I think we just use this one right here. So what we need is this. We need to be able to turn that object into a comma separated string that we pass into this variable, or the connection string. So to do that, what we do is and this has nothing to do with Vue, it's just straight up JavaScript. So we're gonna say let names equals array.prototype.map and .call, and we're going to say this.cryptos s.name and then toString. All right, so now if I console log the names, we should now see that, let's refresh, we have that empty one and then comma ETH. So that's how you do that. Let's get rid of the console log. So now we use Axios, we use a get request, and this is where we send it. We're gonna use backticks to that URL. So that URL started with this, fsims. This is where we put in our names variable that we just created in a couple lines above. And then we do the currency. And we're also gonna have to put in an API key. So let me paste this in right here. The &sims right here, USD, and then API key, which you can find in your Crypto Compare account. So I'm just gonna paste mine in, and I'm gonna do it off screen. Oh, and then don't worry, this isn't the full one. Don't even try it. Don't even try it. We have to write the following code, then response. So we get the response, and we come out, and we take our cryptos list. Let's get this over here. All right, this .cryptos list equals the response data. And then we can go ahead and catch in any errors and console log the error. Normally you want to put this like in a variable that then you can show in the actual HTML template so the user can see. But that should be good to go right here. Now let's console log this .cryptos list. All right, so let's see what's going on there. All right, so notice it only has one. It doesn't, because the other one that's submitted was just blank, a blank name. That'll get omitted automatically. And so we'll have our information here inside of that ETH property. All right, so now at this point, we can start working with this and iterate over it to actually show all the data that we need. So what we'll do is in crypts, we iterate over them with v4. So that'll equal items name in cryptos list, which the cryptos list property holds all of the response data from Crypto Compare's API. And then inside of that, we say key, and this is one of those things that's required by Vue, otherwise it'll screw up. So we have name. So now for our price, we put the number symbol, and then we put format price, and this is a function that doesn't yet exist, which we're going to create right now. So format price is just a quick function I found on the internet to format this price that's returned from them, and I'm going to paste that right at the very end here think it's right here after this one. There we go. Format price. I'm not even going to bother explaining that. It's just something I found that seems to work. All right, so after that, then we need to specify the name. So we just put here, name. This should work now. All right, so Ethereum, look at that. $1,488.65. Let's add Bitcoin, BTC. Now, there it goes, and it's been added. Oh, look at that. Awesome, awesome stuff. And notice, this is how it's automatically responsive. So let's keep on adding more. We need a way to delete this stuff, so that doesn't work. So let's make that work. So on our button, we're going to put, after this, at click.prevent, delete crypto. We pass in the name. And then we define our delete crypto method. Put it right here. We pass in the name, which is retrieved from the template. And in delete crypto, we have to do a little bit of JavaScript and working around the array of the actual, where is it at? Cryptos right here. So when the components start and it's loaded, we call this get cryptos, which is defined right here. It returns all of our data from the MongoDB, and we store it in this .cryptos. All right. And so we're going to use the name, which is defined here, like BTC or ETH, to find the correct row to delete, if that makes sense. So in order to do that, we're going to say we're going to say found object equals this .cryptos .find, and we're going to say x is x.name equals name. All right, so basically it's just saying, look at this this array here and find the name that's equal to this right here. So if I type in Bitcoin or BTC rather, then it's going to look through all of the entries in the database with BTC, and it's going to define it in found obj right there. Okay, so we also have to get the index of that as well, because when it comes to MongoDB, it automatically assigns an ID to each of the entries. All right, so we're going to say let index of array item equals this .cryptos, find index this time. I is I underscore ID, and then found object dot underscore ID. Then we say Axios dot delete backticks this dot base API URL delete crypto. All right, so we're communicating with the backend, and then we put in found object underscore ID. All right, and then we say then. There we go. And we'll say this dot cryptos splice index of array item 1. All right, so what that's doing is it's taking our cryptos right here, and which is the object that's created up here, and or the array rather, and we get rid of this item that was found through name, if that makes sense. All right, so then we call this get cryptos to refresh it on the page. And then finally, we do the catch error thing, which is, we're just going to do that right here. And we'll see if it works. Probably won't work. All right, I have a lot of confidence. So we refresh that. No errors, that's good. Let's try to delete Ethereum here. Oh, it worked. Look at that. So that we can add it back. Add that. How about some, I think IOTA is a 4-letter one. There's IOTA. What are some other ones? Is Doge just D-O-J-E? Yeah, it is. Oh, that's messed up. Didn't anticipate on that. I'll leave that for you guys though. But that's basically it. And as you can see, it is it's responsive. It works well. I would probably want to put a max width on these so they're not flying off, like going real crazy like that. So we're not done just yet. We have to add, we have to get GitHub and get this added as a repository. So we're going to go to github.com. We're going to click here, new repo. We're going to call this Mooncoins. All right. And we're going to make this private. We're going to create the repository. All right. So we can run through this right here in order to get this set up. So let's go over here. I have like a million terminals open already. So here in the root folder of the project, we're going to run git init. And by the way, you're going to need to have git installed. So that's another tutorial you'll have to check out. And then git add all. And then we'll be git commit -m first commit. All right. And then we're going to do git branch m main. I'm just running through all the steps. Git, and then this part I'm just going to copy and paste because I don't feel like typing all that out. All right. And then git push u origin master, or main rather. All right, so this is going to push it. And when I come back here and refresh this, we're going to see all of our files that are ready to rock. So now at Hostinger, and definitely use Hostinger for this as the sponsor of this video, and I definitely recommend them. For hosting, because we're running a Node.js app, we're going to have to use a VPS, or virtual private server hosting. All right, so obviously it can be dirt cheap if you buy in bulk in terms of the months that you're going to need. And just this one with, I believe, yeah, all these specs here, which is, you know, more than enough to get started, is what you would want to choose. So you would select this and get going, especially using the code here in the YouTube description. All right, so this is what I've created. I've already set this server up, and then Sid is now going to take this. And also make sure to remember at Hostinger, this is where you're going to register your domain name, hostinger.com. Let me log in with my information real quickly. We'll log in here because I haven't actually registered that .net yet. So I'm going to register that. Let me get this off screen here. I don't want it showing all my stuff. I'm going to click on domains. All right, so mooncoins.net. It better be available. Sometimes like you check something and then later on it's like in like 5 minutes it's not available. There we go. We're going to add that to the cart. So this is one of those steps that if you're really interested in following this, you should definitely do. So we're going to continue to cart. All right, and then you're going to want to register it, exactly how you want. So check out. I'm just going to do PayPal and get it into my account. And so at this point, I'm going to now hand it off to Sid from DevOps Directive, and he's going to make this work within the VPS that we purchased. All right, I'll see you at the end.
Hello. As Gary mentioned, my name is Sid, and I run a YouTube channel called DevOps Directive, where it's my goal to help engineers level up their DevOps and cloud infrastructure skills. Today, I'm super excited to help take that app that Gary just designed and built and get it ready to deploy onto a virtual private server within Hostinger. Then we're going to connect a custom domain so we'll be able to access that site at mooncoins.net. There's 5 main things that I'm going to do in this process. First, I'm going to make a few minor modifications to the code that Gary wrote to make it ready for deployment. Next, I'll make some configurations within the GUI on hostinger.com to set up the VPS so that I'll be able to connect to it, and then configure DNS to point our domain to the IP address. I'll install and configure MongoDB on the server. I'll install Caddy server, which is going to serve the front-end files and proxy to the backend API. And then I'll also install Node.js, a Node.js package called PM2, which is a process manager that we'll use to manage our backend service. With that, let's get into it. Gary just pushed the latest version of his code to GitHub, so I'm going to go ahead and clone that to my local system. I'll just copy this URL here, then do git clone, paste that in. Now I can change directory into that directory, Mooncoins, and then I'll open up my code editor. As I said, there's a couple of minor changes that I want to make here. The first of which is to modify some hard-coded strings to make them more generic so that they'll work for both our local environment as well as the production deployed environment. Within this app.view file, we've got a hard-coded localhost 4000 here on line 38. I'm going to change that to use an environment variable with process.env, and then it has to have this prefix of view app. Then we can name it whatever we want. So I'll do base API URL. And it has to have this prefix because that'll get picked up when we actually run our yarn build process. Now, I'll store the values that'll get substituted in there in two different files. The first file is going to be .env.development. And this will get used when we run our yarn start command, or yarn serve command, excuse me. So we need to define that same environment variable name, which is view app base API URL, view app base API URL, and then we'll set it equal to that value. So now when we run this locally, it'll behave as expected. Next, we'll create another file, .env.production, and this file will get used when we run yarn build. We'll paste in that same string, but instead of setting it to that localhost value, we'll set it to mooncoins.net. We can remove the port number. This way, when it's deployed into Hostinger and we make an API request, it'll request this URL rather than localhost, which is important so that we have the request coming from the same origin as the front end and the back end. That handles the changes for the front end. There is an additional change on the back end that we'll need to make. Within this database.js file, we've got a connection string hard-coded here. So again, I'm going to remove that and set it equal to this process.env, and I'll call it Mongo connection URI. Great. Now, in order for this to keep running locally, I'm going to add to our package.json file, start here, and that start command is going to set that environment variable before it runs node and then app.js. So we'll do Mongo connection string, connection URI, excuse me, equals, set it equal to that value, and then we'll run node app.js. So now if we were to run yarn start, it would execute this and set that environment variable, which would get picked up by this process environment here. When we deploy it onto the Hostinger virtual server, we'll set this to a different value with some actual authentication for our MongoDB database. That's all I need to do to change the code. Now I'm going to jump into the Hostinger interface and make a few setting changes there. The first thing I'll do is create a DNS record pointing this mooncoins.net to the IP address of our server. So I've already copied the value of that IP address. I'll just go in here under Manage, DNS name servers, and then I'll add an A-type record with the @ symbol. The @ symbol just denotes that it's the root URL. So this will point mooncoins.net to this IP address. We'll add that record, and then we see it shown up here at the bottom. There's lots of these other records that I think Hostinger added automatically. Those are less important. As long as we have this one, we should be good to go. Now I'll go back to the server interface, and I need to configure a way to connect to this server. There's a few different options. I could set the root password here and then log in with that. It's easier and more secure to use an SSH key. I already have one set up. If you need to learn how to do it, they have a tutorial here linked, but I'm just going to cat my public key out and then copy it into this input box. So it'll be cat and then my home directory .ssh id.pub. And so this is the public key that I can paste in there to verify my private key on that server. So I'll paste this in, click add. Looks like it's being added. It could take a minute to connect, but now I should be able to just run this SSH root command and get connected to that server. I'll add the fingerprint to my known hosts, and now we're connected. Awesome. The next step, as I mentioned, is going to be to install MongoDB onto this server. I'm just going to follow this Community Edition on Ubuntu tutorial for 20.04, which is the version of Ubuntu that I'm running. The first thing that we're going to do is to grab the GPG key from the MongoDB servers so that we can verify that it has the correct signature when we download the package. Looks like that worked. Now we need to create a list file so that it can look up the sources for where it's going to download this from. We'll run an apt-get update. And while these have sudo associated with them, I'm logged in as the root user, so you don't actually need to have sudo here if you do it this way. Now I can install, using apt-get install, MongoDB org. This is the Community Edition. Now while that's installing, I'll point out this next session. If we didn't do anything else, the next time we did an apt-get update, or upgrade, it would actually upgrade the version of MongoDB, which could be an issue if they were breaking changes. Instead, we can run these commands, and that will pin the version to the current version that's being installed so that we don't run into that issue down the road. So now that that is finished installing, I'll go ahead and run that. Okay, good. And now we're going to use systemctl to actually control MongoDB, and this way we can set it up so that it will run. If it crashes, it will restart, and when we restart the server, we can configure MongoDB to start up automatically. So I'll run systemctl start mongo. We can then check the status of it with this command, and we can see that it's running. Awesome. Finally, I'll run system control enable Mongo, and this will set it up so that when the system starts up, Mongo will start along with it. Great, so now we have MongoDB installed, but it's important to note that by default, MongoDB doesn't actually have any access control, and any user can do anything. So we'll want to add some user accounts with more limited access so that we can control which data users can actually see within the database. This is a good tutorial on the official MongoDB documentation on how to do that. The first thing that we're going to do is just connect into the database with the command mongo. This will bring up a command prompt running inside the database. We're going to use the admin database, so we'll switch to dbadmin, and then we're going to create a user. So the first user that I'm going to create will be called myuseradmin. It's going to have this role user admin any database, so this user will be able to do pretty much anything. Finally, it's going to also have read write any database, so it can read and write from not just the admin but any database across the whole install. It then prompts me to input a password, so I'll do that. Great, so it looks like that added successfully. While we could use this user, I'm actually going to create another user with less permissions to use for the actual application. So again, it'll be db create user. This one I'm going to name non-admin user. So here, the name of the user is non-admin user, and it only has this read-write role specifically for the Mooncoins database, and that's the database that we're going to store the data for the application. Again, I input a password, and it looks like it was created successfully. Finally, before I exit out, I'm going to use Mooncoins. This will switch to the Mooncoins database, or if it hasn't been created, it will create that database and then switch to it. So that's all I need to do right now within the database itself, so I can exit. However, I do need to now restart MongoDB to pick up those changes. So first, I'll stop it with systemctl, stop MongoD, and now I'm going to modify the configuration file that MongoDB uses upon load using this command. So I'll open it in vi/etc mongodb conf. We want to update the security section. It's going to be security, and then we want to specify authorization enabled. Authorization enabled. We'll just save that, and then we can just restart MongoDB, check that it's running, and it looks like we're good to go. So we now should have those two users that we created, one admin user, one non-admin user with passwords, and we're going to be able to use that within our application configuration to connect to the database. Next up, I want to actually copy our application code onto the server. There's a few ways we could get the code onto the server. I could copy it from my local machine onto it, which is the method I'm going to use. I could also pull it from GitHub if I wanted to. If we were going to automate this, likely we would have some CI continuous integration tool that would push changes with each commit to the master branch or the main branch onto our server, and then we'd be able to build from there. But for now, I'm just going to manually copy it from the local system. So I'll exit off of this SSH session, and then I'm going to rsync the code from my local directory onto the remote directory. So the command for that will be rsync -r for recursive. I don't want to copy in the node modules folder because they could be slightly different from my Mac onto this Linux machine. And so I'll exclude, and I'll use the asterisk as a wildcard, so it'll catch both the front end and the back end npm modules folders. And now we want to copy from my current working directory, present working directory, where the source code is, onto this VM at the IP address. And then on that machine, I'm just going to use the standard convention of user source app. Okay, it looks like that worked. So now I'll SSH back into that machine and just verify that that code is actually there. So I'll change directory into this folder. If I list the files, now all of the code is onto the server. Perfect. With that done, I'm going to go ahead and start to install the different dependencies for these. By default, Yarn is not installed in Ubuntu, so I'm going to have to go ahead and install Yarn. It's similar to installing Mongo. We're going to add a GPG key. Okay, then we're going to add the sources list file. We'll apt update. And then with that complete, we'll just apt install Yarn. Awesome. Looks like it's done. So now I can just do yarn install. I'm inside of this top level directory. And so if I do yarn install, it'll install all the dependencies in that package.json file. Yarn install. Great. With our dependencies installed, we can now build the application with yarn build. As I mentioned earlier, using yarn build will set it into production mode. So we'll use that .env.production file and pick up the correct base API route so that when we deploy it, it will have the same origin as the front end. it looks like it was successful. If I list the files in dist, I can see all the files that were built, including the index.html as well as some JavaScript. Now I need to install Caddy, which is the web server that we're going to use to serve the front end as well as proxy to the back end. When I first tried to set this up, it wouldn't start and I couldn't figure out why. But then I looked at what was already running and I noticed that there was an instance of Apache running. So if I do top, I can see all the processes running on the system, and I see Apache 2 here running. It was binding to port 80, and so I actually need to stop that before I can spin up Caddy. In order to do that, I'll just run the command /etc initd Apache 2 stop. This way, port 80 will be free and we can install and run Caddy on it. Again, installing Caddy is similar to installing these other packages. We start by setting up the GPG key. We then add the lists file. We'll run apt update. And then finally, we can install Caddy. Now by default, Ubuntu will only serve files within the /var www html directory. So we're going to need to move our built front end into that directory. The way that we can do that is with the cp or copy command. We'll copy recursively with -r, and then we'll copy from user source app dist, which is where those built files are stored, into var html, www html. We'll also want to configure the firewall so that inbound traffic can access our files via Caddy. In order to do that, I'm going to install UFW, or Ubuntu Firewall. I'll then configure a few rules. We can do UFW allow HTTP. This will allow inbound traffic on port 80. We'll also do HTTPS, which will allow inbound traffic on port 443. And finally, we'll set allow SSH so that we'll still be able to connect via SSH. At this point, we need to enable the firewall. So we do UFW enable. Yes. Now the firewall is active with those rules applied. To configure Caddy, we use a Caddy file located in /etc caddy file. So I'll edit that file now. Here's the default. We're going to make a few modifications to it. The first thing that we need to do is replace this port 80 with our domain name. So in this case, it will be mooncoins.net. We then need to specify the email address associated with that domain in order for the authentication challenge to generate the certificate to succeed. This is contact@coursetro.com. We need to set the root directory equal to where the website files are stored, so I just copied them there. It's that var www html directory. And then we're going to add one more directive here, the reverse proxy directive. And so what this is going to do is allow us to catch any requests to mooncoins.net/API by doing this /API star. So this will catch any request that is mooncoins.net/API and then any trailing characters. And then we're actually going to redirect that request to localhost 4000, which is where we're going to serve the backend service. File server is correct. And so now we'll just exit out of this. And we want to actually restart Caddy to pick up these changes. So I'll use systemctl, restart Caddy. So that should pick up the changes. And then I'll also do systemctl enable Caddy so that it would be run upon startup for the virtual server. At this point, we should be able to access the front end on our domain. If I go to mooncoins.net, I can see that it loads properly. However, we don't have the backend running yet. So if I try to add one, BTC, add, nothing happens. That's expected because our backend's not actually running. So that takes us to the final portion of this. We need to actually activate that backend. And as I mentioned, we're going to use a tool called PM2, which is an NPM package that manages processes so that we could have multiple instances of our app with the load balancer in front. If the process dies, it will restart it automatically. So it's much better than just running it with Node and then app.js. So in order to install this, I'm going to install it globally with npm install pm2-g. Oh, I don't have npm. Yarn global add pm2. I'll cd into my backend directory. Now, like the front end, we need to install the dependencies for the backend. So we'll do yarn install. And we'll grab all those dependencies from package.json and install them. Great. One additional consideration is that if I just ran it as is, it would run as the root user. Preferably, we don't want our processes running as root, and so instead, I'm going to create a dedicated node user that will run to use this. In order to do that, I'll do the add user and then name it node. It's going to ask me for a new password, which I'll give it. Again, none of these values matter. And so now we have a new user named node. In order to set PM2 up to be able to handle modifying the startup scripts, I do need to allow Node to elevate itself to user with the proper password. So to do that, I'll run user mod -a, capital G, sudo node. So this adds the node user to the sudo user group so that it can elevate its privileges as necessary. In order to use this node user, I'll now use su, which will permanently allow me to start a session as that user, and then, not node 3, just node. So now we have a session running as that node user, and we can use this to spin up our process. As I mentioned, we want to set up PM2 so that it will start our process upon startup. So I'll set PM2 startup, and here it notes because I'm not running as root, it gives me this specific command that I can execute to set up the startup script appropriately. It asks for my password to elevate the privileges. And now it should be configured in systemd to run upon startup. At this point, we're ready to actually spawn the backend app. Similar to when I ran it locally with yarn serve, I need to specify that environment variable. Mongo connection URI. And that's going to be equal to mongodb : / and then it's going to be the username, so that's non-admin user, : and then the password at localhost 27017 is the port, /mooncoins is the database, and then we need to specify the auth source equals admin. So this, remember when we created that user, we created it within that admin database. So by setting auth source equals admin, it will know to use the admin database to look up our user and figure out which roles it should have. Now we'll specify PM2 start, and then the path to our app.js file. So it'll be user, source, app, backend, app.js. That's going to spawn our process, and now we can see it running. Finally, I'll do PM2 save, which will take the current set of applications running, and PM2 save, which will take the current set of applications running and store them into that startup configuration. So if I go back to here and I try to add this new coin, BTC, and hit return, it adds it to our list, and that gets stored in the database. Awesome. Let's add another one, ETH, Litecoin. We can try deleting one, adding it back. Okay, it seems like things are working. Let me refresh the page. We see that the data is still stored. Also, because I set up that reverse proxy, if I go to mooncoins.net/API, we can hit the API directly and see the response returned in JSON. And that's it. We have our application running on the virtual private server connected to the custom domain. To recap, we had to make a few modifications to the source code, changing out some hard-coded strings for environment variables so that they would be compatible with both a local deployment as well as a remote deployment onto our Hostinger VPS. We then configured the VPS with our SSH key so that we could connect and set up a DNS A record pointing our custom domain to the IP address of that server. On the server, we installed Mongodb and configured it with authentication with a user that had limited scope and was only able to access the specific data that we wanted. We installed Caddy Server to serve our front end as well as proxy to the backend API. And then we installed PM2 and launched our backend service using that to manage it. Hopefully this video was helpful in learning about all the different steps that go into designing, building, and deploying an application. If you want to learn more about the latter half of that process, especially around DevOps and cloud infrastructure, feel free to come check out my channel at DevOps Directive. But with that, I'll hand it back to Gary to close us out.
All right, thank you very much for that, Sid. Hopefully you all found that useful. You did probably a million times better job than what I could have done during that process. So of course, I think it would be a great exercise for a lot of you if you followed along during the development of this app to extend it, make user logins so that, multiple people, they can track their own coins and all that stuff. I'd love to see what you end up doing, if anything. So as always, make sure to subscribe if I can talk, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.